Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everybody at Web Summit. You've made it. You've made it to the last session. How do you feel about that? Yes. It's fantastic to see you all still here, considering it is the last session. You could have gone away, but no, you're here to learn something new. And we're going to talk about unicorns. We could talk about all sorts of things with unicorns, but I think we're talking about the tech unicorns, not the actual unicorns, although I think that would make a really interesting discussion too. We could throw in a narwhal occasionally. But let's basically get into it. I'm the kind of moderator that likes people to introduce themselves. It's much more emotional. So, Lydia, why don't you start us off? Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Hi, so I'm Lydia Jett. I'm with the SoftBank Vision Fund, and I invest in consumer and e-commerce companies primarily, and then other assets that feed into that ecosystem. And obviously, SoftBank's a big investor in unicorns these days. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'm Louay, Eldada. I'm founder, CEO of Quanergy. We make hardware and software for self-driving cars and other automation systems. We're in Silicon Valley.
Hi, my name is Jeff Arnold. I'm the CEO of ShareCare. Started WebMD way back in 1998, and ShareCare is kind of a newer version of that kind of brings all your health together in one place.
Yeah, my name is Ragy. I'm the founder and CEO of Sprinklr, and Sprinklr is a social media management platform that focuses on large global companies. We're based out of New York City and have about 1,200 global brands as clients.
Fantastic. So we're also going to, as well as me asking questions, we're going to want you to all ask questions as well. So you've got the Slido app. You've been using it all day, I hope. Make sure you ask us some questions and upvote the ones that you like the best, and I'll throw them in every now and then. So get started on that as well. Listen, you know, unicorns. We're talking about billion-dollar companies here. What is it about the structure of a company that needs to be maybe different or better, or the culture of a company to get it to that billion-dollar status? Or is it really just about having the right product, right time, right opportunity? You know, is there something different about unicorns, maybe? Lydia, what's your thought?
So we tend to see companies really for the first time as they're on the cusp of being those unicorns. And so for us, it does tend to be more about market, position in the market, the team around the table, as opposed to assessing where they have hit that critical juncture that you're talking about to become that unicorn. We don't see them that early. But I think we aren't particularly different than other investors in looking for the type of data and tracking and understanding of your business and understanding the efficiencies of those businesses going forward as we make assessments about how to get beyond that and become the decacorns of the world.
Right.
Well, I think what makes a unicorn is the ability to listen more than talk when you're figuring out what you want to do, the ability to take risks without fear, and believe fundamentally, deep inside that you're working on the right thing. Almost by definition, a unicorn is a company that was successful when others were not. That's why it's a unicorn. It's big. It has identified a need that others were not aware of. That's why it was able to grab a big market or a big share of a market, which means almost by definition that when it started, no one believed in it because its thinking is unconventional. It went in a different direction, in a space that's not crowded, and it made things happen. And then, of course, once you're a unicorn, everyone is a believer.
Right. Jeff, what do you say to that?
Well, the industry that I work in is healthcare, and so I think to be a unicorn, you have to have a big idea. You know, how do you get all your health in one place? And disrupt the industry in the sense that we want to put the consumer first and have the consumer be empowered to own their data, control who sees their data. But with that disruption, because of the complexities of healthcare, not disenfranchise a lot of the important stakeholders. So your doctor, your health system, your health plans, your employers. How do we start to collaborate in ways that together can be very empowering to the individual? So it takes a big idea, all your health in one place, but I think in industries like healthcare, it takes a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything different from unicorn versus a non-unicorn, unless you're selling hype and potential, which we're not in the business of doing. I think for companies that are scaling linearly and whose valuations are based on financial metrics, it's just another milestone. Of course, when you have that kind of scale, you're focusing on people and processes a lot more than the product and the product market fit and scaling across markets and teams. So the focus is slightly different as you scale, but I think it's not a valuation milestone. It's probably a revenue and growth milestone.
I mean, as part of that process, is there something about companies that are going to have that kind of success that they understand failure better than other companies? They understand what failure looks like and how to measure the data underlying that failure and use that to their advantage, use that to create hypotheses and tests and move forward. You know, is there something special around understanding failure in a potential unicorn?
I mean, when you get to that, to have $1 billion valuation, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and then growing on it. To get to that scale, you have to be able to pivot and deal with different parts of the business and grow them and prove that you can grow all of them, the product side, the people side, the sales side, the recruiting side, the taking care of customer side. So it's more proving general management and scaling experience than it is failing and recovering from it, because I don't think you can even create a few $100 million of value without knowing how to fail and recover from it.
Right. You want to add something, Jeff?
I mean, I agree. I don't think of it any different, whether it's a $250 million valuation or 500 or $1 billion plus. It's the same, principles. Is do you have a big idea? Do you have the right team? Did you get proof of concept? And can you scale? And live with an incredible sense of urgency to try to solve these problems as fast as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the concept around scaling has so much to do with management, as you both have said, and it is about having that next depth of team to really rely on and being able to lift up and think broader in our companies, at least. I think we struggle when we see a company that can't think about that next step, and it's very hard to do that if you are in the day-to-day operations and in the weeds. So you've both said it, but it is really about having the depth of team and the management capability to do that.
I agree. You need to have the right team. It's important to take your time when you're hiring to hire folks that have the right mix of aptitude and attitude. If you don't, you gotta have a team that has a good team spirit, works well together, works hard. It's not a popular thing to say that you have to work hard. You absolutely have to work extremely hard. Also smart, that's a given, but you have to also work hard. I'm not aware of any unicorn or whatever definition you use, single or double-digit billion in valuation company where people do not work extremely hard. They're all very smart, but it's not enough. There are lots of smart people in the world, and it's you need to use all the advantages you can.
How much does process play a part in this? Because I was always told about the OXO problem. If you have ordinary processes, you can have extraordinary people working for you, but you'll still get ordinary results. And so, you've got a great idea, you've got a great product, you've got product market fit. There is enough consumers out there who want it. Behind the scenes, is process and focus and hard work, is process really the key there?
The process is absolutely necessary. I happen to have worked at small and large companies. I learned a lot about processes from large companies, and I applied them in a lean way at smaller companies. That's necessary because to scale, luck has nothing to do with it. You need to have a very deliberate path, follow structured processes, and execute. Just be execution maniacs.
Okay. Jeff?
We've made 11 acquisitions over the last 5 years, from Berlin to Vermont to California to Brazil. And, we work very hard not to be known as a collection of acquisitions, but one platform. So to get to one platform, you have to be very deliberate, and you have to have a lot of process. But more importantly, I think you have to be very data-driven on your decisions. And when I look at the difference from starting WebMD 20 years ago to ShareCare today, a lot of the guesswork is out of the formula. The data is so readily available. It's now what's the process you use to apply it to get the best results.
I think a lot of people say they want to be data-driven and they really want to be data-driven, but then we still have not the unicorn in the room, but the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, and they still seem to be able to override the data.
Yeah.
There's how do we stop that from happening in organizations?
Well, for me, I have a very strong-minded CTO that makes sure that that I stay, data-driven, because a lot of times, you want to go with instinct and you want to, take the kind of the collective crowd's will to do the things that they want you to do. But, what I've learned in my career is that's a short-term solution. And the knowledge lies in the data. You just have to have the patience to find it.
Sure.
What we have learned is a lot of things that allow you to be successful in that early stages, the first $100 million, actually become a liability as you scale past it. And a lot of times people that excel in those stages, people who can wear multiple hats and want their hand in everything and be controlling, are in a good fit as you scale beyond it and really need the processes. So definitely there will be a stage where processes are what's going to drive the company and to facilitate that future growth. And if you don't have processes, you'll die right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Lydia, anything to add?
No, that's perfect. Thanks.
Awesome. Look, I'm going to throw in one of the audience questions. I know that you're voting on these, but I particularly like this one. You're a unicorn now. We've gone through everything. We've got the product market fit. We've got the marketplace. Everything's going great. You're a unicorn now. You've got your billion-dollar valuation. What's the next step, and what changes in the business after that point?
I think the next step is to continue to focus on satisfying and even delighting customers, and the rest will happen. I think if companies that focus too much on being a unicorn and growing in valuation find it hard to achieve, because you have to focus on problems, you have to be paranoid, you have to think constantly about what might not work as opposed to think about the success. That's when you actually become a big success.
For us, it's all about innovation. How do we continue to see around the corner and continue to innovate? But because you get to a certain size, you now have the opportunity to collaborate with your partners, so you can think with them what are the right next products to develop. So I think, obviously innovation going forward is key. I think organic growth is also very important. So, not being a collection, again, of acquisitions or financially engineering X to Y. It's, now that you've made the investment, you've gotten to that place, how do you show strong organic growth?
Yeah. What do you think about, Lydia? I mean, organic growth actually is kind of interesting to me. I mean, when I look at social networks, for example, the ones that got scale quickly by buying their way into scale actually created quite toxic social networks, whereas the ones that organically grew created a community that not only supported each other but brought more people in organically. And so organic growth is kind of interesting to me in that respect. What's your view on that?
It's something that is really interesting to talk about, because if you look at the companies that have grown the biggest and the fastest, they tend to get more efficient over time. Otherwise, you start to see a little bit of wobbliness, and they don't get to that next step. And so how are you driving efficiency? And that efficiency in organic growth is driven out of strong execution capabilities on your core business and utilizing data to do that and to continually improve, but also thinking about how do we see around the edge, as you've already said. So there aren't many companies that hit the rarefied air that we're talking about, and it's because it's very hard to do both things at once and to continue to grow more efficient every day.
Right. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I don't have anything to add to it.
No.
Okay, so we're going to ask you a different question then. So I kind of am very interested in this top question. I'd love to get our wonderful panelists' view on this, because I see a lot of startups all over the world. I travel around an awful lot. I see very different ecosystems in Silicon Valley versus everywhere else in the world. I see completely different makeup in Silicon Valley when it comes to how we start and build a company versus, say, Berlin or London or Tel Aviv or anywhere. I won't necessarily go into what I see because we don't have a lot of time, but I can't fact check this, but somebody is saying there is only one unicorn from Europe among the top 30 unicorns worldwide. Why do we think that is? Is it because of the difference between Silicon Valley? Because I'm assuming the other 29 are probably in the United States and likely in California. Is there something else? What have you seen out there, and do you think that's a real issue? What can Europe do better?
I think most people in Silicon Valley were not born in Silicon Valley. They went to Silicon Valley because they have what it takes to make it in Silicon Valley. So people are risk-taking in Silicon Valley. There's a culture of accepting failure on your way to success. You have investors who will invest in high-risk but high-reward opportunities. That's where geographically we all happen to be.
So your answer to that is that actually the top 30 are probably Europeans. It's just that 29 of them are living in Silicon Valley.
Some of my employees are phenomenal European entrepreneurs, but they're in Silicon Valley now.
Okay. Your thoughts?
We're based headquartered out of New York, so I do have a different perspective.
Yeah.
I don't personally think that it's the people, naturally they gravitate towards the valley, but I think it has to do with the ecosystem. So Valley has an ecosystem, not just if most people think it's entrepreneurs and money, but there's an ecosystem of people who have been there and done that are networking and mentoring people and guiding them, which is very valuable because you tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. And even in New York, we're trying to create an ecosystem, but we don't have a history, a legacy of 20, 30, 40 companies and 100, 300 people in that network who can guide and coach them. Now I work very closely with John Chambers, who's acting as my mentor, and I'm seeing the difference quite instantaneously of learning from someone who's been through the journey. And I think when you look at Europe and other hubs, you lack the maturity of the ecosystem, even if there might be VCs and entrepreneurs there, and that ecosystem matters a lot.
Lydia, last words on this one?
I think the mentorship and the experience and just the reps are very important, but I think it's also important to notice that although SoftBank is really excited about Europe and is seeing more and more in Europe than we have in past times, it is not one market in the way you see China or the US or India, and yes, there's lots of regional differences between any of those markets, but it is different operating across many different countries from a variety of a product. So it doesn't mean it's impossible. SoftBank is currently committing to Europe to a couple different investments, so newly minted unicorns. We're excited about Europe, but it's a bit harder.
So you heard it here first. If we could just bring Europe together in some crazy way so we can all work together, maybe I'll go back to the United Kingdom someday and tell them that. Ladies and gentlemen, please give all of our panelists a warm, warm round of applause. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.